Bill Mondale in charge of shushing people.
Yeah.
That's the only reason he came. He's hired as a shusher. He's making $200 tonight. I want to thank you guys for coming and gathering together. Be up really late. Some of us are going to go home to bed after this. Let's call it late day. And thanks in advance for the individuals who are going to share some stories about Warren. I want to thank two people, Erica Spitzer Rasmussen and Tamsin MacKenzie. Lovely ladies, are you here? Tamsin in the back with the parade wave, Erica up front. Daughters of Warren MacKenzie. Thank you for enabling Northern Place Center to salute Warren in this for coming as well. I've invited several individuals who were influenced by Warren or mentored or friended or otherwise to speak tonight to their own relationship with Warren. I gave them a time limit of maybe like between 2 and 5 minutes, but they know me well enough to know that I will pull them off stage and pull their mic out if they ramble on. But I wanted to share my own story of connection with Warren, and it's not unique to anybody's here. I'm a student of his students, Randy Johnston, who couldn't be here tonight. He sends his regards. Warren was a god to so many of my classmates. I have one classmate here, Joe Sigwald, but I'm older than him, so I think he started when I was finishing. But he was a god among men to all of my peer students, and I was no potter in undergrad, but I certainly had an appreciation for this man. If for no other reason than he meant the world to Randy, and Randy meant the world to me, so I had that connection through him. Warren was more often than not around at special events and such. When I started at the Clay Center some 20 years ago, I look exactly the same. In my early days, he was here more and more, and it was his wife, Nancy, who went out of her way to talk with me, and when I had kids, she was extra interested, and we talked parenting a lot, because she just adored her kids. Warren was always kind to me, but when I became director, this is my funny Warren story, when I became director, Nancy gave me this card, and it was just effusive with, I'm so proud of you, you have so much potential and opportunity, and you're going to be great. And Warren scribbled at the very bottom something, I couldn't find it, I ransacked my house for it this morning, but it was something along the lines of, you have big shoes to fill, I'm sure you'll work hard. At the time, I didn't think anything of it, but every time, because I'm a keeper, I'm kind of a hoarder, I think my husband's here, you can attest to that, I keep every card that you've ever given me, and I remember seeing that recently, since his passing, and thinking, oh my God, that like said it all. But he was an amazing man and kind and generous to the Clay Center. But what I will miss most about Warren are his stories, and I think many of you in the crowd had the opportunity to sit with him around his table and hear his folklore, and you saw the way his eyes lit up when he would tell some stories, the same stories again and again, but he would sit you down, and there would always be like a piece of pie or a quick bread or something on the table that somebody had dropped off, and he'd show you the book about the leech pottery, and he'd put that Korean vessel in your hand, and you'd feel like, I get to touch this. And he would tell you some stories, and in the later years, a family member, like Tamsin, would be there to keep him on track and remember dates and times and faces. But it seemed to me that he was happiest at that kitchen table in his final years telling those stories, and he would entertain any number of guests that would show up. And every time I was there, there would be 10 other people who showed up. I'm sorry. So when he passed away, I found out via social media on New Year's Eve and just wanted to crawl in bed and cry and couldn't because something had to be said on behalf of the Clay Center. But you know, my experience again was not unique to anybody else's. We all share in this collective loss of this amazing man, from his immediate family to his immediate students to people who were 3 generations away. And as a sidebar to that, if you didn't get a chance to see the beautiful tribute to Warren that we had in our Encita show, it's around the corner, it's just back behind the gallery, by the bar, where you can trace his lineage for years and years and years and years, and it's just the most amazing thing. So everyone felt the loss. I went to my chiropractor's office and told her, and Kelly said, oh my gosh, I've thrown pots there before, he passed. And she was as crushed as I was, and you just think about that connection to so many people, and we're all sharing in this loss, but these wonderful memories. So I'm really happy that we are able to gather here today. If you look around the room, some of us are older than others, me included, but you can see that his connection to people transcends so many things, age, zip code, Hogwarts houses, you name it, potters, sculptors, and I think that's a really wonderful thing, and we need to think about that and think about how that relates back to our own lives. So I invite you to listen to some friends, and I'll try to keep them on track, and I'm not going to give any major introduction. They're going to come up and say, hi, my name is Tammy, and this is how I know Warren, and they're going to tell their story. And then we're going to come back together, and I'm going to say a few words about a program that we have in Warren's honor, and then we're going to toast this great man. Sound good? Okay, first up, we have our friend, Ms. Sandy Simon. You get the only introduction. Mrs. Sandy Simon. I'm sorry.
I guess that means I'm married. I live in California most of the year in Berkeley, and I started Track Ceramic Gallery in 1994 to honor potters who had devoted their life to making pots. And of course, Warren falls into that category. And I really had a space, very small, in front of a warehouse we had purchased from Peter Volkus that was right on the railroad track. So I called it Tracks. And Warren, at that time, was still my old teacher. He was my teacher in 1968, and I had no idea how his reputation had soared. And so when he agreed to have a show, mainly because people were buying his work out of his shed and reselling it for a lot of money, he didn't like that at all. And I was determined to sell his work for the prices he wanted them to be, so they were accessible to everyone. And he said, just price them however you need to. It's expensive there in Berkeley, everything costs more. Buy them outright and own them so you can price them as you wish. Well, I didn't listen to that at first, and of course that's Warren, he would always say that, and I just marked them double of what his teapots were, $12 and they were $24. And of course, they were going out faster than I could ever get them. And it was all because certain people that we all knew who they were buying them and reselling them. So Randy Johnson called me up and said, I want to tell you something. You need to mark those pots higher because the market is demanding it. And I really started Tracks to support potters. You know, that was the whole idea, because for me it was so frustrating to send your work and not have anyone tell you that they got it, and then not tell you that it broke, or especially not paying you. And I just had determined that I was going to be an honest gallery person, and I have tried to do that my whole life. It's been since 1995, and honestly, I give up. I give up. Truth of the matter is, no one trusts a gallery owner. You can't win. And I really thought I could change the feeling about that by being different, being responsible and respectful. But what happened more than anything that I didn't expect is people don't know I'm a potter, and I don't like that either, because I really want to be a potter, and that's in my blood. So Warren has had shows with Tracks since 1995. The biggest one we ever had was in about 2009, and we had to, and this is not new for anybody who knows Warren's work, but draw numbers. People would go in and buy a pot. They were allowed to, I think. And we had probably 200 people come, and it was so much fun, and he just always touches people. And Janet, who's here, of Lowe's, she and Warren had a little dialogue. We had a stage, and we had a crowd, and it was just really remarkable. So that's my latest. I have a lot of stories from when I was a student, and a lot of terrible things happened. But
I'll say that to the after party.
And I can't stay tonight. I'm sorry I have to go, but I am really happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
We've got Guillermo next.
Trying to sift through stories about Warren that would somehow briefly, encapsulate what his character was, and I don't know that I can. But I think Warren was such a model in so many ways for so many of us, and I don't know exactly what the experience that these potters had started with him earlier. I had I met Warren in 1981 when he came to Venezuela to teach and make pots, and he started a movement in Venezuela. You know, that was Warren. He just, there are people that have written to me recently when he died to say, you know, I'm still using those glazes and, you know, making those pots. And so I just thought I'd kind of really quickly mention a few of the things that touched me so much about having the contact with him. After meeting him, he came back, or he invited Lori and me and Christy Ward, who's somewhere around there, and Clary Alien to come and work with him for a month in his studio and have a sale. And that was an incredible experience for me on all kinds of different levels. Not least the contact with the people, the audience that he had already, you know, kind of inspired to love pots and come out for a pottery sale and interact with them. That, you know, that's been one of the defining MOs of my life, of making a living as a potter. And I think probably that was his greatest gift for people like me, is to make it possible. You know, you just to know that somebody's doing it, it kind of makes it feel that you're not totally crazy. Even though your family's telling you you're crazy, and your friends, and, you know, it just. So I had thought of a few things to talk about, but, you know, his process. He came out of working at the Leach Studio, where he had a real rigorous training as a, you know, craftsman. He had to make pots that were exactly to the catalog. And he had a famous story with Alex. When they came back, they looked at each other, and I don't know the exact words, but they said, that was the best pottery experience we could ever have had, but we're never going to run a pottery like that. So I think, you know, just the restrictions of the working to a catalog were, you know, too much creative restriction. And but some things remained from that experience that were really important, and those were just the process and the making of pots that was not, you know, waiting for inspiration. You had a make list. You were assigned a make list. He had a big kiln, and when Alex died, he had to fill this big kiln that was designed for 2 people by himself. So he had to make a big list. And I know a lot of you guys out there know all this so well. I'm you know, it's not any news to you. But he would make a list, and I've got a list here. He gave me, you know, we were talking about a glaze, and he said, he gave me a piece of paper, here, write it down. So I write down this glaze, and when I get home, I find that on the other side, Warren being Warren, you know, you never want to waste a sheet of paper. It's only written on one side, right? So this was one of his make lists, and I brought it because I thought, you know, you might kind of want to look at it. You know, it's really kind of sweet. And so it starts off with 100 Unomis, just 100. And then at the end, he's totaled the number of pots. So it's 490 something pots at the end of the list, because he needed to know that he had to have 40 boards of pots for the cool side of the kiln, 40 boards for the hot side of the kiln, and then a number of platters, and then something like 30 of the tall pots for the top. So I guess that, you know, just to summarize, that's one of the things that really influenced me from him was that work process. It was, you know, the making of the clay, and then the pots, and making the list. And then once you had all the pots you needed, then you would shift into glazing after bisting, and then back in the kiln, And then after the unpacking, he was very kind of private about unpacking the kiln. He didn't like to have a lot of people around so he could have an intimate time with the pots. And then processing and schlepping the pots up to the showroom, and the process sort of would start over again. But it kind of bled into his life too. His life was very much sort of a part of that same process. So Warren and Nancy would get up at 7. Breakfast was pretty much always, you know, granola, yogurt, fruit, juice, and coffee, and then you'd be in the studio at 8. Lunch was at noon. At 1, you were back in the studio. And at 4, he would say he didn't have anything left in his hands, you know, so he would quit and go back to the house. And not having email at the time, he didn't have that problem, but he was a copious letter writer. So he would sit down at the table and write at least 2 or 3 letters every day. And then there'd be cheese and crackers and some drinks and the news. And Nancy would have dinner, 7. And then they were both avid readers, so they would settle down to the book and read. And they were also very social, as most of you probably know. You know, every week there would probably be 2 or 3 nights when we would be out. And bring out the book. Okay. Well, thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Oh, who should we hear from next? Wayne? Yeah, he's excited. He said, I have to go third.
I didn't prepare for that. Much like some of the other people that have made a lot of notes. I thought I could sort of speak off the cuff. And I'll start by linking up with what Guillermo said. In the period of time after Nancy passed away, Guillermo and I and Warren all worked together for, I don't know, you tell me, 2 years? I don't know, it took a lot of clay making, a lot of schlepping of pots up at Guillermo's and firing together. And that was a really great experience. And reminded me a little bit of the time, I don't know if you know, but I worked at Warren's from, I'm going to say 1984 to about 1990, pretty continuously. So, had a lot of lunches. Wednesdays were Joan Mondale lunches. It was a really interesting period of time in my pot making. And Mark Ferris and I built a studio about 1990, and then I was off to Wisconsin and made pots in a different way, different place, different way. But the things that I like to remember with Warren, were my school days, really. My second year at the university, I wandered into the ceramic studio at night. I was taking a sculpture course, and the sculpture was raised and welded steel, and we would be in this room beating on steel. It was really loud. It was, and through this door between the steel sculpture studio was the clay studio, and it was peaceful, calm, tranquil. I would go. Oftentimes, I would go to the studio at night, so it was very calm, very quiet. And I ran into a guy named George Beers, who many of you know, and he said, "Do you want to give it a try?" And so that was my first experience. So I took a class after that, and I probably never had a class from Warren until 2 or 3 quarters on. And I've always said that all of my influence from him was really not through the university. The classes were fine and all that, but what really was important was the time spent out at the house, sitting at the table, watching this man prepare food for people who just dropped in. So that's what I remember, and that's what I loved about the man, and I'm gonna miss him.
One of the only presenters tonight that doesn't have plaid on.
Hi, everybody. I'm not a potter, but I'm surrounded by potters, and my love for potters started when I met Warren. My mother wanted to meet him because she was throwing some pots, and a good friend of ours said, "Let me surprise her." So the surprise was to bring her to Warren's place and to have her see how he was making, because he was a maker. She had no idea. My friend opens the door and she said to my daughter, "Do you know where you are?" She said, "Yeah, you said we are going to look at gardens," because she was a master gardener. She said, "No, you are at Warren MacKenzie." She couldn't believe it. I had taken my camera with me, and I said, I would use the camera for one shot to shoot my friend that I will always thank for introducing Warren to us. And I was there. I was going to be silent and away from them. The happiness was going to be of my daughter and my friend to introduce him, and the three of them being together, but I had my camera. And I took a picture. And I could not stop. I was away. Nobody knew I was there. I was working on it because I was fascinated with the process. And Guillermo mentioned the word process. I love processes. So one day, that was in 2008. In 2011, I looked back at the pictures I had taken in 2008, and I decided to show them to a group of photographers led by Tom Arndt, who also knew Warren. And they all saw I was there to be critiqued. And the critique was very kind. What I liked the most was when I was told, "You gave us Warren." It was not about the final product. It was about the process there, this very moment, how he was holding this clay, what he was doing with it, the concentration, etc., etc. So I did show this work. There were a dozen of pictures. And I said to Tom Arndt, I said, "Tom, what is your suggestion?" He said, "A, you haven't copied anybody else. And you speak about the process, and you speak about how this man is doing what he's doing." He said, "If you have a little ambition, go back and take more pictures. I don't like to ask favors." But I decided I was going to call and tell him that I wanted to show what I had taken in 2008. He said, great, come on over. I go with my pictures. I place them on the table in the living room. And he looks at the first picture and he says, wait a minute, Nancy. He wanted Nancy to look at the pictures with him. And the reason for that, he said, is because he had not really seen himself work. I was seeing him. And then he started talking with every image, saying, you know, I'm not like the good potters that use their fingertips and that's all that is dirty. I am all over with the clay because I love to work with wet clay, very wet. So I started learning. At the end of this meeting, I said, Warren, will you, Mr. MacKenzie, I was calling him then. I said, will you allow me to come and take more pictures of you? And he stood up and he said, these doors will be open 365 days a year. I could not believe it. And I started going, respecting him tremendously because I knew that he was so concentrated when he was doing what he loved to do. And kindly, first of all, we were not speaking. He was working. And the first time he indicated that he wanted to have an exchange was, hey, he said, I hear a lot of clicking. I don't know what is of interest. So he invited me to have lunch. I said, thank you so much, but I can't today. A few days later, he said again, would you like to stay with us and have lunch at 12, as Ivana said. Oh, Warren, I have to go because I did not want to disturb their privacy. And then another day he said, you know, I'm hearing a lot of clicking. So this thing about clicking, he repeated it many times because I was not talking. I was clicking because what I wanted was not a cheese smile. It was photograph the process. So that work of mine made a first portfolio that I called the 26 Views. Had no final product. It was the process. Then casually, one day, he said, you know, we'll be going to the beach pottery. I have heard, I think everyone wants to know about beach. I said, oh, you are? He said, yes, we have been invited to go for a master class. I said, tell me a little bit about it, and he did. And we said our goodbyes, and I went back home, and I called the director of the beach pottery, and I asked if I could come with Warren and photograph him. She told me, we have no money. I said, I didn't ask for money. I asked if I can come and take pictures. She said, yes, you could if Mr. MacKenzie allows you. So I called Warren and I said, Warren, this time I'm calling you for a permission. He said, permission? You have it. I said, you don't know what? For what? He said, doesn't matter, you have my permission. I said, Warren, I would like to come with you to the Leech Pottery. He said, you come with me to the Leech Pottery. It is so beautiful. You are not going to pay attention to me. You are going to be all over. I said, okay, can I? Yes, he said. So I decided to go because to me, it felt like a part of the process. After they left with Alex in the early 50s, he was always thinking of the time he had in England and in Japan. And I thought that this return to village pottery was really very significant, because it was going to be the coming back. So I went to village pottery and I photographed him, and I came back and I made a second portfolio that I called East, West, Midwest. And I'm very happy that I did take that step, because it was so important to see him surrounded by so many friends that came from all over the world to see him work. And he was teaching at the same time. He was telling to the people at the village pottery what the recipe for the glaze was, how to do that. He was involved with everything, like bringing back the past to the present. And it was a very good time. And I want to tell you that Warren is with us, will always be with us, and his work is all over. And we don't care where it is. We'll all use it. We'll all love it. We'll all cook and bake and put it in there. And even, as I told him once, the sound of the fork touching the pottery, touching the little place, is as important as the plate itself. Thank you.
Lovely photos. They're back across from the bar and back in the little room we were doing some interviews in. So thank you for letting us use those photos. Ron Gallus, Mr. Gallus. Do I call you Mr.? Mr. Gallus. See, look at, he's got a form of plaid on. It's more of a gingham, but.
It's all old school.
Okay.
I started graduate school at Minnesota in 1971, 48 years ago. And Warren was 46 years old. And we had this studio, it was called Automatic Engineering. And it was an old machine shop on the West Bank, over by the Navy. And it was a monumental studio for all the people that worked there, glass artists, sculptors, but that's where the graduate ceramic studio was. Warren was my graduate advisor, and he was, I had no idea, where my life was going at that time. Paul Driesing was my studio mate, and his work was outstanding, and I just thought to myself, I'll never graduate. It's just too competitive. There's too many good artists around. But Warren was very encouraging, and he was a great artist educator to be around, because he just exuded this kind of silent energy. And he was always wanting to have conversation about your work and what you're doing and why are you doing it. And it was very encouraging. And it was, we were in that studio all the time working. And it was a great group of people to work with. I had started doing some salt glazing and didn't know too much about it. And Warren had just came back from Penland School of Crafts, where there was a workshop called the Nifty 50. And it was 50 different artisans that were there. And Warren said to me, you gotta meet this guy from Madison, Wisconsin that's doing the salt glazing. And you should apply for this apprenticeship at Penland School of Crafts over the summer. And he said, I'll write you a letter of recommendation and see if you can get accepted, because you need to learn more about the process. So as it went, I did get accepted, And when I did go to Penland, the studio technician didn't show up for the summer. So luckily enough, they asked me, if, you want to be the technician? I said, hell yes. So I worked 3 weeks with Don Wrights. I worked with a woman named Mary Law, who was Byron Temple's assistant. And then Warren came for 3 weeks. And we had a great 3 weeks working there because, I was a graduate student in Minnesota, and he could trust me for what we were doing there. And it was a great experience. And so that really catapulted me in terms of my career and committing to the ceramics field. And the things that Warren did, he said, okay, I remember in the fall of '72, he said, well, we're going to go to Kansas City Art Institute. His good friend Ken Ferguson taught there with Victor Babu, and we're going to have a critique with students down there. And those undergraduate students at that time just happened to be John and Andrea Gill, Stan Welsh, and Kurt Wieser. And they always had top undergraduates there. So on this Saturday, the kids from Minnesota, we pulled out our work, and the kids from Kansas City, they pulled out their work, and we had this great critique. And it wasn't hostile, it was all constructive. It was about content of work and everything that we were doing. A little bit of tech talk in there, but it was very, very encouraging, and it was exciting. And we did that for the following 2 years. He took us to Kansas City, and it was just so wonderful. And it just being around him was exciting all the time. We went from that experience at Penland School of Crafts with Don Wrights. I learned how to do greenware salt glazing, where you put the pots in green, you take them up to disk temperature, and then do salt glazing. So Bill Farrell at the Chicago Art Institute said, Warren, we want you to come here for a 5-day workshop, and we want you to do this greenware salt thing. And he said, sure, we'll do it, but I want to bring my grad student with me. So I was just absolutely flattered that he would take me with him and assist him in that. And I had all the glazes that I had gotten from the workshop in the summer, and he made pots for 3 days straight. And we glazed all those pots with like an Albany slip glaze, and we put them all in the salt kiln and green, and they fired the kiln off. Everything came out perfect. Just beautiful. Everybody was surrounding the kiln, trying to, get, and he was just, oh, here, just take this, just take this, just take this. He didn't charge anything for it, so that was a very enlightening time. I graduated from Minnesota in '74, and I've taught for 42 years, and I'm grateful for his guidance. And I wouldn't have had all of those great opportunities if it wasn't for him, because he was so encouraging and challenging, because he knew how to get to me to make me work. But sometimes I get a little lazy, and wouldn't particularly apply myself, but he knew how to push the right buttons for me. So the other great thing is that I taught at St. Olaf College down the road here for 29 years, and I would tell my students about all the great experiences with Warren, and they said, well, can we go see him? Can we go see him? I said, well, let me call him up and see if he'll have us out there. Well, I think every spring I would take the students out to see him, and he loved having my students from St. Olaf there because they were so engaging, and they would talk to him. It wasn't like, what glaze are you using? And he said, I really like it, Ron, when you bring the kids up, because it's good for me to have them and to talk to them, and we'd spend the whole afternoon, and then he'd say, okay, now you can only buy 2 pots, and everybody buys some pots. So that was a great asset to me as an educator, to have him as such a resource to go to, and his generous and his kindness, it just was overflowing. He was so good about it all. And he was a great, when I look back on my life, I never thought it would be where it is today. And all the things I got to do, travel, workshops, all my great colleagues from Minnesota, Mark, Wayne, Sandy, Mark, there's so many of you, and all the other community here in the Clay community, we were so blessed to have that opportunity to have had him, you know, because people say, you work with Warren MacKenzie? God, no. Go drink beer with him, you know, he's a great guy. So I'm thankful for all that. Just one little last one. I think it was 2010. We at St. Olaf, we have an interim in New York City. So I take 15 students to New York for the whole month. So there was a Betty Woodman show at Max Protect Gallery. And so we're there in a big opening like this, you know. And John and Andrea Gill come up and they said, Ron, it's you, Ron Gallus, yeah, and you're John Day. Oh, remember those critiques at Kansas City Art Institute? God, those were just great. And we started talking, and then, you know, Warren was, Mark were good friends with Betty Woodman, and then we connected with conversation, and it was just a really exciting time. Thank you.
Before we get the mic up again, just raise your hands. Do you want us to bring out more chairs? We have plenty of chairs in the back. I have plenty of colleagues here. Who wants a chair? One, two, the crowd. I said I have plenty of colleagues here. Where are they? Allison, you see? She'll kind of cover the crowd with some chairs coming up. If you need her, we can fly her down. Bucky, the Buckster. You're the Buck. Lisa Buck. Was that okay?
Yes. Okay. Now everybody knows what you call me.
It's private issue.
I would echo what Ron just said about Warren's generosity with students, and that was just one of the things I wanted to say is that year after year I brought high school students out to his studio, and every single time he would say, sure, bring them out, and we'd bring a bus out, and the kids would stand around and also be quite engaging. And Warren was so generous with his information, with questions for them. And then it would be time that we needed to catch the bus. And Warren would say, well, wait a second, we didn't see the kennel, and we didn't go in the playroom. And so we had to do that. And afterwards, I would go out and bring Warren and Nancy blueberry tart or something like that and just say thank you. And one time I thought it would be a great idea to bring Warren some bee balm because it was quite generous in my yard. So I made a big planter with bee balm in it, and I came to the door, and of course Nancy was really nice about it. And Warren said, well, what the hell am I going to do with that? That's what I always mow in the yard. So, and that seems to be somewhat typical of Warren's straightforward nature that I appreciate it. What I wanted to share is that I was lucky enough when I was fresh out of college to move to Stillwater, and I got a job teaching ceramics at a high school, and I knew about a kitchen shop and gallery called, I think at the time it was Food Tools, and then it switched to Hand to Hand, both which are fabulous names and speak to what was happening in those shops. They were, the Food Tools and Hand in Hand was a partnership with Warren and Wayne and Mark. And I can't separate the three of them really for the gift I was given at that time in life. In my early 20s, landing there, getting a job amongst the pots is probably a lot like the students who come from River Falls and work here. And what I learned from that and learned from Warren was really two things. One, about being a potter and seeing adults doing that and talking about work with such sincerity and integrity and intent that it set me on a path of life that I could believe in, and one that I've held as a standard all this time and still do, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think the other thing was learning how to talk about work, how to display work, how to think about it, how to be generous, both with my students and with friends, with your home. All of those things are really lessons from Warren and Mark and Wayne. So thank you for that.
I think it's time we hear from the Singwall lineage of Still 2.5? Good. I mean, the third used to, right? Okay.
I got a bunch of stories. Go fast. So, when I went to grad school, I was visiting with Warren. I said, I'm going to go to grad school in Utah. And he said, why the hell wouldn't you want to make pots in Utah? Because there weren't good pots in Utah. But the funny thing is, the Utah State was, like, the energy and the teaching philosophy and students probably really parallel to what he created at the U of M. So it was a great spot. But fast forward to, must have been 2010, my wife and I, we bought a house in River Falls, and we're like, all right, how are we going to make money to buy Christmas gifts for Christmas for our kids? So we had a sale. So we invited jewelers that were friends, Peter Janet, making pots. Gail sewed up a bunch of handbags and purses and such. Advertised, made postcards, sent them out. And snowing, right? Early December, Saturday, it's snowing, nobody's coming. We moved most of the stuff out of our living space to make room for the work on display. And I'm just sitting on the ground, and all of a sudden Peter J says, holy shit, Warren and Nancy are coming. So I hop up, and they walk through, and Nancy has a housewarming gift, one of her pieces, which is probably still my favorite piece of art I own. But and there's Warren, blue jeans covered in clay, clean sweater over what must have been a t-shirt covered in clay, and you could tell Nancy drug him out of the studio, did not want to be there. And they came in, it was a great visit, and when we left, sure enough, the snow melted off the bottom of Warren's studio shoes and left a puddle of muddy snow melt, and it dried and remained there for about 9 months. It ended up on the whole 2-inch oak floor, but certainly I wouldn't be making pots if it wasn't for Warren and his clay influence. And when I was a student at River Falls, it was awesome to be able to go out to the showroom, look at pots, hope to find a Warren pot, but mostly there weren't any. But there were still great pots from many people that are in this room. But you could pick them up, you could be influenced by them, you could see how they footed them, how they made a lid on a teapot or whatnot. And you work up the courage to go knock on the studio door, and most of the time you'd be in there. And we just talk pots. That's all I want to do is talk pots. So I really cherish those times. And one time, Byron Morgan, my good studio pal, and I went and looked at all the pots that we could, and then walked down there and knocked on the door, and we're just talking with Warren for a while, and he started talking about finding a shard, just conversation, a shard of a medieval jug, those ones where there's the thumbprint along the foot, and he said, looking at that shard, you could tell that there was a slab added to that, to the wall of the pot. And he, said, well, obviously they must have thrown it and then add that slab later. And you wouldn't want to throw a slab or a jug without a bottom and then add, So they must have thrown it upside down, and then once it was firmed up, put out a patty of clay, and then reverse that. And that became where they would attach that fresh slab with their thumb, and then continue throwing that the rest of the pot, so they would make it nice and light, and it's just necessarily making a jug. So Byron and I thought this was the coolest thing ever, so we went back to the studio and started making those, failing, throwing cylinders basically, letting that top firm up so that you could flip it over and try to continue throwing. But it works, and that's how I made my pots, taller pots, bigger pots that I make today. So he wasn't trying to influence us, but that's what it was, just conversation, and that's kind of what I think about, without always trying to influence, but he was constantly. So that's what it is. the students would always ask what to put on their bisqueware, and I would look at it and I would say, oh, this texture that Tomoko would be nice. And then they would argue with me and say, well, I was really thinking this. And I'm like, well, why ask if you already, whatever. So I just started saying, well, when they would ask, I'd say, oh, I said Cucino. Oh, I said Cucino. So then they stopped asking. So I decided to make a t-shirt. I don't know, this is 2002, maybe?
You just made another iteration during Ensika. Someone else, I was going to
Yeah.
find it. Should we set up to your Etsy site for that? Warren had one of those, didn't he?
Yeah, Warren did that one.
He's worn it before.
Yeah.
Who did I see on this list? Maren. Is she here? Maren Clown.
That's great. Glad I get to follow the show.
Thank you, Sam.
This is an amazing, wonderful occasion to talk a little bit about Warren. And I want to start coming to this country in 1984. I had no idea who Warren was, but within a month, I was eating burgers with him in Des Moines, Iowa. And that came about because I was working with a German potter in Iowa City, who, of course, knew about Warren and knew him, and invited me to tag along to a workshop, Slippery When Wet, which I didn't know what that meant either. I didn't have that good vocabulary then, and so anyway, I was like, yeah, why not? I'll go. That kind of all sounds a little strange. So it was Warren was a presenter, and Kirk Mangus and Judy Unifrio. So a great spread of aesthetics. And there was a reception at the end of the day, and my friend was saying to me, hey, you know, we need to get some dinner. And what do you think? Warren kind of looks forlorn. Should we ask him? And so we did. And he said, yeah, I don't have any plans. I'll join you. And that's how it came about, that I had Iowa beef in Warren in October 1984. So through my friend, I learned a little bit more about it, but fast forward, it was only then 9 years later when I was moving to Minneapolis to go to graduate school that I became more aware of who Warren MacKenzie was. Warren had already retired at that point. After my graduate years, I set up shop in Stillwater, and the hardest thing, as a lot of you know, is to have kilns available once you get out of school. So somebody said, you know, Warren just lives 2 miles down the road from you. You could ask him. And I knew him for many days, even though I had met him, and there were occasions and shows and working at the Clay Center, but nonetheless, anyway, eventually I picked up the phone and I said, hey Warren, I just want to ask you a question. And he said, what question? You want to find my kiln? And I said, yes. So that's how it started. 7 years working outside the studio and receiving a lot of generosity from Nancy and Warren to use the house, to stay there, to house sit, to use the kilns, to share a lot of meals. In 2002, my now husband and I were planning to get married, and the best man bailed on us last minute. So we were unloading a kiln, and my husband, we didn't even talk about it really. He said to Warren, he said, so my best man just bailed, and we're getting married, we have a wedding coming up. Would you mind just stepping in? And he said, yeah. Where and when? I'll show up. I'll be there. And that's how it came about that Warren and Nancy were part of our wedding party. And so I picked those kind of 3 stories and occasions to sum up again, generosity and kindness that I think he was all about. And I also think he really personified humility. Warren had strong opinions, and that was one of the wonderful things about him. But he truly felt humble about his work. He truly felt it was not about him. It was not about his ego. he was channeling something that came through the clay spirit, and I think that's was one of the greatest gifts that he shared with all of us. Thank you.
Mike Norman. He doesn't have flat on either, I was wrong. Sorry.
Well, I was going to read something to you, but everybody else is speaking off the cuff. As best I can, I'm going to try to read this in the osmosis way. The connection that I had with Warren began at the University of Minnesota. It was in 1961. I was soon to graduate from the U with a degree in forestry, but I needed 12 more credits. They could be elective. My background, my parents were both artists, so I've always had a love of art. And it seemed like a natural fit that I would pick the electives at the art school. Obviously, being young and virile, I wanted to get into the life drawing class. and it was always filled. I mean, as much as I do, I never could get into a class. I opted instead doing a couple courses with Malcolm Myers and Brittany. I thought after that I had 6 credits more to get one more time trying for the life drawing class. Didn't work. Here was on the same page was Ceramics 101, and I thought, well, I'll try to register for that. And it was filled. But,
I'm really sorry.
So I went over to the Holman building. At that time, being at the on the Egg campus, I didn't know where the Holman building was. Got directions, wandered over there, and started looking around. I saw this old trusty guy, and I thought, that must be the teacher. And so I went over to Warren, and I said, you know, I would love to take your class. I don't want to do an entomology class because I hate bugs, and that's the only other class that's open. Will you let me in, please? And Warren said, what do you know about pots? I don't know anything about pots. And he said, perfect. You're in. Come to class next week. So I did, and everything changed at that moment. I didn't realize it, but it's sort of like a switch flipped in my life. It was sort of like Jung caressing me with his synchronicity, and then with a heavy dose of serendipity, everything came together, and forestry went on. And I took 2 more classes of ceramics as an adult special after graduating, and just carried on from there. Warren's teaching was wonderful in that he gave you the techniques and let you run with that. He didn't, I never saw him saying that you should be a potter or you should do it this way or that way. He was concerned, of course, about the technique and, things being solid, not cracking and so forth. But he wanted you to find who you are and to express it in your work. And I don't know, for me, I still had this love of drawing. I mean, I really did like drawing. It wasn't only because in the life drawing classes they had these lovely women. But I started drawing on my pots almost the first quarter. And he never said anything about it, you know, that it's sort of crappy or it doesn't look good. It was always encouraging. And for everybody else as well. So, in a way, I wanted to also speak of a sort of like an afterthought, you might say. I was up at St. John's Pottery and visiting Richard Brescian, who's a good friend of mine. And he was telling me about his time in Japan with Takashi Nakazawa as an apprentice. And during that time, he had the opportunity to work with the pottery workers and his master, who he was apprenticing under, to build a couple of kilns. And Richard told me what was described, what that event describes in a word, which is hidari uma, which actually means, hidari means left or left side, and uma is horse. But the vision of this word, or the event of building a new kiln for a potter, or the potter builds his own kiln. The word describes a vision, in a sense, of townspeople bringing to the pottery a beautiful horse. The potter is required to climb onto the horse. There's no saddle. And the potter sits backwards. It looks towards the tail, looking away from the head. At that moment, the horse begins to walk, and is walking into the future. And the potter is still, at this time, is looking at his old work, and he doesn't know what will happen in his life, what the new kiln will produce. Will it be as good? But it is what it is. And in that sense, I believe that we all here have had major events in our lives, some good, some sad. And for us here today, Warren's passing is a sad thing. But in my mind, I believe that we are all on Warren's spirit horse, and he is carrying us into the future with love of clay and life.
Getting close. I'm looking for a Mark Ferris. Is there a Mark Ferris? Only if you have plaid. Oh, okay, no. Close.
This is a non-clay story. Lisa Buck mentioned that there was a store that we had for a few years, and the name of the store was Food Tools. The first name of the store was Food Tools. It started in about 78, I think. 79. Wayne is my studio partner and corrects me all the time. I don't hold any grudges. And when did we end? When did it end?
5 years later.
5 years later. So before it began, we needed some money. Wayne and I had talked about this idea of having a store that would be a place where you could buy, that wouldn't be a gallery, so it wouldn't have the sort of the intimidation factor of walking into a gallery. It would be a store where you could go in and buy stuff that wouldn't be just pots, but it would be the kind of things that would be related to pots, things you would find in the kitchen. And then we named the store Food Tools. And we had the name, I think, before we had the money to open the store, probably. Anyhow, the ante for this store was $5,000 a piece. So Wayne and I had verbally committed. And we said, who else can we get to do this with us? Well, I had a former student from Hamlin University who was a farmer, so he was making money. And I prevailed upon him, and he could work the store in the wintertime because he was a farmer and he wasn't busy in the winter. And he was living in a rural area, and so he was looking for a little excitement off the farm. And so after that, we thought, oh, Warren's got some money, he might do that. So speaking of generosity. So we prevailed on Warren for the last $5,000. And Warren said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Not with a great deal of thought, but we'd known Warren for a very long time by now. This would have been a good decade and plus after having been students. So we had a store, and no one really wanted to run a store. That's the beauty of this plan. No one really wanted to run a store. Least of all Warren, who was selling all the work he could make out of his shop, but he agreed to contribute work, although he wasn't going to sit in the store and mind store. Some of you may know that Warren was, when he was in the Army, he was working as a graphic designer and painter and so forth. And I had, as part of my contribution, decided to do the graphic work, to do layout for flyers and posters and folders and stuff like that. And so we had arrived at the name Food Tools, and we needed a sign. And this store was in the Brick Alley building, which is still there and still one. And there was a large area that we had decided that's where the sign was going to be that announced the store. And so the question was like, where are we going to get the sign? And Warren says, I'll do it. And so one day he turns up with all the stuff you need to paint a sign. He had a pounced life-size thing of the name, Food Tools, that he taped up on the wall. It had already been pre-pounced. He had a little bag of chalk, and he did that, took that down, and I don't know if you know me, he was left-handed, southpaw. So I was watching him do this, and I thought, this is going to go well. I don't think this is going to turn out. And there's like a 2x8 that he had to sit on that went over an open stairway. So he's up there with his paintbrush and a paint can, and there's a stick that you use when you're a sign painter as well. So he had all this stuff. And in about 15, 20 minutes, he had the sign painted. And he turns to me and says, how was that, Ferris? It's pretty great. That's my story.
Mark's trying out his new material for his stand-up gig. I don't have the date on it yet, but it'll be on our website. We do have a final speaker. I'm going to build this up. My colleagues are going to be handing out some refreshments. So as they're walking around, this is going to be for a toast. So, Janelle and Will, be patient. Don't drink it yet. We're going to wait for the toast. The lighter color fluid is the be non-alcoholic. Am I correct? So if you have questions, just ask. It's because they ask our girls, but I can't say that. So if you guys want to hand it out, well, we have Linda. Is there a Linda in the crowd? A Linda Christensen? Do you have any sort of plaid on? Counts, ready? Counts two. Counts two. Is that real plaid? Is that plaid? Counts two. It counts two. I'm sorry.
Hey, Mark, I thought the sign was going to be that neon sign. It was about this long, that said food tools.
There were two signs. The first sign Warren did, the second sign was a neon sign.
Yeah. I think that sign is still up.
Is it?
I think so. Oh, thank you so much. It's kind of scary being up here. I guess I was thinking about the last time I was at Warren Tamsen's house just the other day, and I ran to a cupboard and I pulled out one of my favorite pots, and it was a little higgy bowl. And as I thought about that bowl later in the day, I realized it felt like an old friend. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about being at Warren's house was just all the pots there. And I brought my very favorite pot of Warren's, and in a way I think it's kind of like that hoggy bowl. And as I can hear Warren's voice as I describe it, any competent potter could have made this pot. There's nothing special about it. There's nothing truly remarkable about it. There's nothing fancy or elegant about it. It's really kind of stupidly simple in a way. And I think, oh, no one could have made this but Warren. It's so great. So the other thing I thought about for my story would be, it's a little bit like Food Tools. The predecessor to Food Tools was, for me, it was really Warren's showroom. And in his showroom, he had things like this. I just brought a small one. We've got quite a few bigger ones at home, but Warren had this thing about him. He's sort of like a drug pusher with pots, not pot, but pots. And he would send like a check for $300 or $400 or $500 to a store in California. And the store had stuff like this: spoons, bowls, baskets, mudcloth, and they would just send him a bunch of stuff in a box, and then he would unpack it in his showroom, and he would sell it to people like me for exactly what he paid for it. Not a penny more. He wouldn't take sales tax. You could steal it. I mean, he was just so passionate about all these beautiful handmade things that we could live with. And I think that's really the lesson, the big lesson I got from Warren was to be able to live with beautiful things and have a beautiful life and enjoy us all. And then to try to make things too. That's a whole other added element. So thank you, Warren, and thank you to all of you, and let's live and make some more stuff.
Oh, you guys have been so wonderful and patient. I will talk quickly, as I do. We're getting to the toast. We're getting to the rowdy part. Thank you again to everybody who was willing to share a story. I know it was at times fun and light and other times emotional. And there's a lot of vulnerability that, comes with standing up here with the microphone. I know that. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. And we didn't tell you or seek permission, but Mackenzie's sitting here because she's filming you. So we're going to have to get signatures before they go in order to use it, because none of you signed off. And you can set something for my alcoholic here. The old crow is just too strong for me. So anyway, I wanted to say there are 3 pieces that we have up front for sale. I believe they might still be for sale. Not everybody rush the counter. But you'll notice they're priced in a way that helps us support an existing program in Warren's name, the Warren MacKenzie Advancement Award, that was actually the brainchild of Mark Ferris. And I think it's now in its 6th year. And it was a 5-year program. We wanted to see how it went, and it was incredibly successful. So we are continuing on through some generous donations and through the Clay Center's own internal funds. And that's a fund that you guys can support. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to help his name live on through Northern Clay Center through supporting this, either through a purchase of a piece of pottery tonight or just a general donation. But it goes to 2 to 3 emerging artists from across the country who are either currently undergrad or graduate students or within a year out of those programs or in an apprenticeship program. So there's a lot of room in there for the artists to grow and explore and travel. It's a really amazing, amazing thing. And Warren was adamant that it wasn't just for potters. So it's for sculptors as well, and it's for people across the country, which I think is really wonderful too. But the pots are gorgeous. If you just want to look at them up front, you can too. So I'd like to end with a quote that Warren shared in his 1997 Regis Master Lecture, long before my time, 2 years before my time here. Warren said, in any culture, the needs of the people control the direction of their self-expression. In earlier times, people were directed by their need to find food and to survive. Later, they developed belief systems, turning to religion or magic, concerned with gods and goddesses, myths, and political power. And artistic expression became a way to support those beliefs, to oppose enemies, and to strengthen the culture. I do not believe it is any different in our times. And so I think we all can agree that the culture of clay in our community is forever strengthened by the works and the words of this great man. And so we should all take a lesson from his words, and we should influence the world in positive ways. And so at this point, does everybody have something? Something in a little biodegradable cup, right? So yes. Compostable. We're going to be collecting these separately. So, okay. To Warren MacKenzie.
Warren MacKenzie.
That's courageous. I encourage you all, that's the end of the formal program, to mill about the building, to handle his work, to give hugs, to reconnect with old friends, and we will get to a point where we'll flicker the lights and escort you all out, and you guys can go to the next party at which you're speaking. Thank you.